Part 1. The Forgotten Celebration Expanded Version minus 1,000 words. Olivia Carter stared at the blank calendar on the kitchen wall, realizing Ethan's 40th birthday was only a week away. The number felt heavy, almost symbolic, like a checkpoint in their lives. She wanted it to be special, but her mind was blank. The truth was, they hadn't celebrated anything properly in years. Not birthdays, not anniversaries, just quiet dinners, polite smiles, and a lingering silence that seemed to fill their once lively home. Ethan had changed. Or maybe she had. Either way, something between them wasn't the same anymore. He used to come home with stories about his day, funny things his coworkers said, or a new recipe he wanted to try. Lately, he barely spoke. He worked long hours as a project manager at a tech company, and when he got home, he was too tired to talk. He'd eat, scroll through his phone, and fall asleep on the couch. Olivia didn't blame him. Life had become a routine neither of them could escape. Still, she missed him, not the version she lived with now, but the one who once danced with her in the kitchen to old love songs that night. She sat by the window with a cup of tea, thinking, what could she possibly do to make him feel seen again? A surprise party felt too loud for him. Expensive gifts seemed pointless. Ethan never cared for things. What they missed, was connection. She wanted to remind him and herself why they fell in love. Scrolling through her laptop, she searched for ideas. Creative birthday surprises for husbands, she typed. The usual suggestions appeared. Vacations, handwritten letters, romantic dinners. She sighed. None of it felt right. Then, as she scrolled further, one small ad caught her attention. Hire a professional life photographer, capture the story of your love. The photo in the ad showed an older couple laughing by the ocean, their faces lit with warmth. Something about it stopped her. The photographer's name was Grace Miller, and her tagline read, "I don't take pictures, I capture emotion." Olivia clicked out of curiosity and began to read. Grace's website described a unique idea. She didn't pose couples or ask them to smile. Instead, she spent a day with them, following their real interactions, catching genuine emotions, small gestures, unspoken moments, looks that words couldn't explain. Her clients said it felt like therapy, like remembering who they were. Olivia's heart tugged at the thought. Maybe that's what she and Ethan needed. Not another plan. Not another trip, but a mirror to show them the love they'd lost sight of. She almost closed the page, thinking it was too strange, too intimate to bring a stranger into their quiet lives. But something in her gut whispered that this wasn't strange at all. It was brave. Without overthinking, she sent Grace a message. Hi, Grace. My name is Olivia Carter. My husband turns 40 next week. I'd love to give him something meaningful. Can you help me? The reply came an hour later. Absolutely. Let's capture your story. Olivia's fingers trembled as she confirmed the booking. For the first time in months, she felt a spark of excitement, nervous but hopeful. The next few days passed quickly. She planned a day in secret, arranging for Grace to meet them early on Ethan's birthday. She made a list of meaningful places they could visit: the coffee shop where they met, the park where he proposed, the beach where they once promised each other forever. Each place held a memory that time had quietly covered with dust. On the eve of his birthday, Olivia found herself sitting in bed beside Ethan, who was reading emails on his phone. She wanted to tell him about the surprise, but she held back. He looked so tired, his face half lit by the glow of the screen. She reached for his hand. Big day tomorrow, she said softly. He smiled faintly without looking up. Another year older. She laughed lightly, though her heart ached a little at the distance in his tone. The next morning, Ethan woke up to the smell of coffee and cinnamon rolls. It was the same breakfast they used to share on lazy Sundays long ago. He walked into the kitchen, surprised to see balloons and a small birthday cake on the counter. Happy birthday, Olivia said, trying to sound casual but excited. Ethan smiled, rubbing his eyes. You didn't have to do all this. I wanted to, she said simply. But there's more. Someone's coming over. His eyebrows rose. Someone. Before he could ask, the doorbell rang. When Olivia opened the door, Grace stood there, mid-30s, confident but warm, holding a small camera bag. Her smile was genuine, not forced. Ethan looked confused, but Olivia quickly explained. She's a photographer. She's going to spend the day with us, capturing memories. Ethan blinked. Like a photo shoot. Not exactly, Grace said gently. Just think of me as a quiet observer. Pretend I'm not here. I'll just follow you around and capture what makes your story yours. He looked unsure but nodded. Olivia could tell he was skeptical, but there was kindness in his eyes. The same kindness she fell in love with years ago. They started their day at the small cafe downtown, the one with mismatched chairs and cinnamon dust floating in the air. As they sat by the same window they once did on their first date, something unexpected happened. They began to talk. Not about bills or work or schedules, but about them. About how nervous Ethan was that day years ago. How Olivia spilled her coffee and laughed so hard she cried. Grace moved quietly around them, capturing moments the way Ethan leaned closer when Olivia laughed. The way her eyes softened when she looked at him. For the first time in a long time. Olivia didn't feel like she was talking to a stranger. She was talking to her husband again, the man she'd missed by the time they left the cafe. The tension between them had faded. Grace followed silently, documenting their journey through the streets of their shared past. Olivia could feel something gentle, unspoken, beginning to stir again. As the day went on, she realized this wasn't just about giving Ethan a gift. It was about rediscovering something they'd both let slip away. Something ordinary yet precious. And though she didn't know what the rest of the day would bring, one thing was certain: this birthday would not be forgotten. Not by Ethan, and not by her. Part 1 ends, leading into the emotional events of Part 2. Part 2, The Day of Memories expanded version minus 1,000 words. Ethan wasn't sure what to expect that morning. The idea of having a stranger follow them around with a camera felt awkward. He wasn't used to being photographed. He wasn't even sure why Olivia thought this was a good idea. But as he watched her talking to Grace, smiling in a way he hadn't seen in months, he decided to go along with it. Maybe it was time to stop resisting her efforts and just let something good happen. Grace had a calming presence. She spoke softly, moved quietly, and never made them pose. Her rule was simple: forget the camera. Just live your day. So they did. Their first stop was the old cafe downtown. It's the one with the faded red awning and the smell of roasted coffee beans spilling into the street. It had been years since they'd been there, though they used to visit almost every weekend when they were dating. As soon as they walked in, memories seemed to rush back on their own. Olivia smiled when she saw the corner table by the window. "It's still here," she whispered. Ethan nodded, almost amazed it hadn't changed. They ordered the same things they used: 2 cinnamon rolls and 2 cappuccinos. As they ate, Grace stayed a few steps away, quickly taking photos while pretending to check her camera settings. At first, conversation felt forced. They talked about work, the weather, random things. But slowly the stiffness melted. When Olivia accidentally dropped her napkin and Ethan bent down to pick it up, their hands brushed and they both laughed. It was a small, genuine laugh, the kind they used to share without trying. Grace didn't interrupt. She simply captured that exact second. The one where their eyes met and the air between them softened. From there, they went to Greenwood Park, a wide, peaceful stretch of grass and trees overlooking the lake. This was the spot where Ethan had proposed 12 years ago. The memory hit Olivia the moment she stepped onto the familiar bridge. Back then, he'd been nervous, his hands shaking as he asked her to spend her life with him. She had cried and said yes before he even finished his sentence. Now, standing in the same place, both older and quieter. She wondered when they had stopped looking at each other with that kind of emotion. Grace asked them to walk together by the water. "Don't pose, just walk," she said softly. Ethan slipped his hands in his pockets, looking out at the lake, while Olivia walked beside him. Her hair blowing in the wind. It was peaceful. No words, no expectations, just the sound of their footsteps and the camera clicking somewhere behind them. They stopped near a bench where a young couple sat laughing, clearly in love. Olivia watched them for a moment and smiled faintly. "That used to be us," she said quietly. Ethan looked at her, his voice low. "It still can be." The word surprised her. She turned, meeting his eyes, the same deep, kind eyes she had fallen for. And for a second, it felt like time had folded back on itself. Grace caught the moment perfectly, without saying a word. Later, Grace suggested they visit one last place, the old beach at Golden Cove, where they had spent their first summer as newlyweds. The drive there was quiet but not heavy. Ethan reached over once and turned on the radio, and an old song began to play, one that used to be their song. Olivia smiled. She hadn't heard it in years. When they reached the beach, the air was cool and salty. The waves rolled in softly, leaving faint trails on the sand. Grace let them walk alone while she stayed behind, her camera ready but unseen. Olivia took off her shoes and stepped into the water, laughing at how cold it was. Ethan followed, rolling his jeans up to his knees. They stood there, side by side, watching the sunset paint the sky in gold and pink dot. It was quiet, almost sacred. Ethan reached out and took her hand. No words, no explanation. Just a simple touch that carried years of meaning. Olivia felt tears in her eyes, not from sadness, but from relief. After everything, the distance, the silence, the long days of feeling unseen, they were finally there again. Not perfect, not fixed, but present. When they turned around, Grace was smiling through her lens. "That's it," she said softly. "That's the one." They laughed, a little embarrassed, and started walking back. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the sky turned darker shades of blue. On the drive home, Ethan rested his hand on her leg, gently, like he used to when they were dating. She placed her hand over his, feeling the warmth, the quiet comfort of it. That night, after Grace left, Olivia and Ethan sat on the porch. The world around them was still. The only sound was the soft hum of crickets and the faraway whistle of a train. Ethan leaned back, looking at the stars. "You know," he said after a while, "I didn't think I'd like this. The camera, the whole idea, but it felt good, different." Olivia smiled, turning her coffee mug in her hands. "I just wanted us to remember who we are. Or maybe who we were." Ethan nodded slowly. "I think we still are those people. We just forgot for a while." She looked at him, really looked at the faint lines around his eyes. The tiredness softened by sincerity. He wasn't the same man she married, and she wasn't the same woman. But maybe that was okay. Maybe love wasn't supposed to stay the same. Maybe it was supposed to grow, change, and sometimes be found all over again. When Ethan reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. He held it firmly, like it was an anchor, something real and steady. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for this, for not giving up on us." Olivia's voice trembled just a little. "I almost did. But then I remembered the way you used to look at me. And today, for a moment, I saw it again." They sat there until the night grew colder. The birthday cake inside remained untouched, candles still waiting to be lit. But neither of them cared. The celebration had already happened, not with gifts or parties, but with honesty, warmth, and rediscovery. For the first time in a long time, Olivia felt hope, not the distant kind that fades when life gets busy, but a quiet, solid hope that settles deep inside. She realized that love doesn't always fade away. Sometimes it just waits patient and silent for two people to notice it again. And that day, through a camera's lens and a stranger's gentle guidance, they finally did. End of part 2, leading into the emotional reveal of part 3. Part 3. What the photos revealed, expanded version minus 1,000 words a week passed after Ethan's birthday. And life returned to its usual rhythm. Work, chores, small conversations over dinner. But something in the air felt lighter, calmer. The quiet between Olivia and Ethan was no longer cold. It was comfortable again. They didn't talk much about the day they spent with Grace, but both carried a soft memory of it, like the echo of a song still playing in the distance. One evening, Olivia received an email from Grace. The photos were ready. She sat at her desk, her heart racing as she opened the message. The subject line read, "Your story captured." There was a link and a short note. These images belong to you. Look at them slowly. Olivia clicked the link. The screen filled with soft, golden images, moments that didn't feel posed or planned. Each photo looked alive, like a piece of their hearts had been frozen in time. There was one of Ethan at the cafe, leaning forward as she laughed, his expression warm and amused. Another showed their hands brushing at the lakeside, the sunlight catching her wedding ring. There was one of her standing by the water, her hair flying in the wind while he looked at her from a distance, not with tiredness, but with quiet admiration. Olivia felt her chest tighten. She had lived those moments. But seeing them through someone else's eyes made her realize how much beauty had been hiding in plain sight. Then she came across a photo that stopped her. It was taken at the lake. Ethan wasn't looking at the water or the horizon. He was looking at her. His expression was soft, filled with emotion she hadn't noticed that day. It wasn't the look of a man going through the motions. It was the look of someone who still cared deeply, even after all the years in silence. Below the photo, Grace had added a small note. Sometimes love doesn't need to be rekindled. It's still there, waiting to be seen again. Olivia blinked back tears. She hadn't realized until now that she had been searching for proof. Proof that Ethan still loved her. Proof that what they had wasn't gone. And here it was, captured quietly in a photograph. When Ethan came home later that evening, she didn't say anything right away. She waited until after dinner, when the dishes were done and the world outside had gone dark. She turned on the small lamp by the couch and called him over. Grace sent the photos, she said softly. Do you want to see them? Ethan nodded and sat beside her. As they scrolled through the images, the room fell silent. He smiled at a few, laughed quietly at others. But then, when he reached the photo from the lake, the one where he was looking at her, he stopped. He stared at it for a long moment before speaking. I didn't know she caught that. Olivia looked at him. You were looking at me like that. He turned toward her. I always do, Liv. Maybe I just stopped showing it the right way. Her throat tightened. I thought you didn't feel the same anymore. I thought we lost it. He shook his head slowly. We didn't lose it. We just got busy. We forgot how to see each other, but it's still there. I think it always was. Olivia leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. They didn't need to say much more. The photos had already said everything. All the emotions they'd been too afraid or too tired to express. A few days later, Olivia printed the photos and placed them in a small leather-bound album. On the first page, she wrote in simple handwriting, "The day we remembered us." She left the album on their coffee table, open to the photo of them holding hands by the water. Every time she walked past it, she felt a quiet sense of peace. Months went by, and the change between them grew steady, real. Ethan started coming home earlier, sometimes surprising her with flowers or coffee. They began taking evening walks again, talking about everything and nothing. The laughter came back, not loud or dramatic, but gentle and true. One night, as they sat by the fire, Ethan picked up the photo album and flipped through it slowly. He stopped at the last picture, the sunset shot where their silhouettes were outlined against the sky. You know, he said, that day made me realize something. I don't want our love to become something we only see in photos. Olivia looked up. What do you mean? I mean, he said with a half smile, I want to keep living it. Every day, even when it's hard. She smiled back, touched by the quiet sincerity in his voice. Then let's keep living it. From that day on, they made small promises never to let silence last too long, never to forget birthdays or small joys, and never to take each other for granted again. One Saturday morning, Grace visited them again to drop off the printed enlargements they had ordered. She looked around their home, now filled with framed photos of laughter and sunlight, and smiled. You two look happier, she said warmly. Olivia nodded. We are. You reminded us how to see. Grace smiled. You reminded each other. I just showed you the mirror. After she left, Ethan and Olivia hung the final photo on the living room wall, the one of them at the beach, holding hands, waves brushing their feet. Beneath it, Olivia placed a small plaque that read, Still Here. Still us. That night, as they stood together looking at the photo, Olivia whispered, "It's strange, isn't it? How one day can change so much." Ethan nodded, his arm around her shoulders. "Maybe it didn't change us," he said softly. "Maybe it just reminded us of what we already had." Olivia smiled, leaning into him as the house grew quiet again. This time, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful, the kind of silence that comes when two people finally understand each other again, as the clock ticked softly in the background. She realized something profound. Love doesn't vanish when time passes. It doesn't disappear because of distance or routine. It only hides, waiting for a small moment, a laugh, a touch, a photograph to bring it back into the light. And in that simple realization, Olivia felt grateful for Grace, for the camera, for that one brave decision to do something different. But most of all, she was grateful for Ethan, for staying, for trying, for still being the man who once made her believe that love could last forever. The next morning, Olivia woke early and made coffee. She placed a note beside Ethan's mug that read, "Same cafe. Same time, let's make new memories." When he saw it, he smiled, grabbed his keys, and kissed her cheek as they drove away together under the soft Seattle sky. Olivia looked out the window and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Excitement. Not for the day, not even for the cafe, but for this simple, beautiful truth that love, real love, never truly fades. It just waits for you to notice it again. End of story. A complete, emotional, and YouTube-safe romantic narrative.